Good morning to everyone. It is a great joy to have you all here. Welcome to the series of webinars hosted by Marfund, and thank you for joining us today. We are going to be talking about mangrove restoration and blue carbon monitoring. Thank you for joining us, and we hope that this hour is uh, one of great learning and great exchange of information. So before we move on, we're going to do a little bit of housekeeping. So first of all, a reminder that we have interpretation available, and you can select the language of your choice on the Zoom settings. Instructions are on screen. If you only wish to listen the language of interpretation and not the background audio, you can mute original audio to hear interpretation only. There are some basic rules for every webinar that we organize. First of all, we would like to let you know we encourage a space of learning and respect. So we request that everyone mute their microphones and turn off your cameras to avoid any interruptions. We also invite you to write your full name, your country, and the organization that you are part of, because we have people joining us from other areas, not only from the Mesoamerican Reef area, and we can get to know each other better. We also ask you to post your questions or comments in the chat box. And you can also use Facebook, the comment section on Facebook, to write any questions that you might have, and we will address all of these at the end of today's webinar, the last few minutes of the webinar. And if you want to ask a question directly to one of the presenters, you can write their name as well. We would also like to clarify that the opinions expressed in this webinar are the sole responsibility of the speakers and do not necessarily represent the opinion or position of Marfund. We also have a grievance mechanism. So if anyone wants to fill out a grievance or a complaint, you can please select or take a photograph of this QR code to fill out the form. So this is our grievance mechanism. So without further ado, I would like to welcome our speakers for today's webinar, and Steve Canty, Director of Marine Geo, who will be the moderator of today's webinar and will be giving us some welcoming words. Okay, I apologize for a technical issue there. Welcome to everyone to this webinar. I'm Steve Canty, the Marine Geo Director, a program of the Smithsonian Institution. This is the first of two web seminars focused on coastal communities. Today we are focusing on mangroves, and the coming month we will be focusing on seagrass. As many of us know, wetlands, including mangroves and seagrass, have a very important role that they play and the communities of the region of the Mesoamerican Reef and provide a wide range of ecosystemic systems services, especially for communities with fisheries and coastal resilience. Their critical role are essential for and in the climate change and blue carbon. Coastal communities used to be under the Ramsar Convention, but recently the Framework Convention of the UN on climate change, specifically on nationally determined contributions and the agreement on biological biodiversity are covered. National strategies of biodiversity have increased their attention of governments towards mangroves and seagrass. And these represent an important synergy of these three conventions to protect these coastal wetlands. Today, we have three excellent presenters on mangroves. Dr. Claudia Tutli, Jorge Herrera, Dr. Jorge Herrera, and Dr. Miguel Cifuentes, who will highlight the enormous efforts that have been carried out over the last years in the region of the Mesoamerican Reef and Central America. To understand more what the ecosystemic services are provided and these wetlands and protection based on evidence is improving and are helping in the recovery of these systems. Without further ado, I would like to introduce the first presenter, Claudia Tutli, Associate Professor of the UNAM Merida University. She's a marine biologist who did a doctorate degree in the University of Barcelona. She's a member of the National System of Researchers, specialist in adaptation, mitigation, and vulnerability of coastal ecosystems to climate change, an expert in mangrove restoration, blue carbon, and ecological monitoring. She is the coordinator of the uh, project coordinator of the Gulf of Mexico, the South Pacific, and Yucatan Peninsula. Co-author of the Mangrove Ecological Restoration Strategy developed at the Primary Production Laboratory of the Merida Unit. So welcome, Claudia. Please go ahead. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for your presentation. And I would like to share my screen now. Okay, we can all see your screen. Thank you very much and welcome all of you to this webinar. Today, I will be talking about a handbook or guidelines that have been developed by many people for the ecological restoration of mangroves of the Mar. It's important to remember that mangroves of the Great Caribbean and the Mar together are 26% of the worldwide coverage of mangroves, and their ecosystemic services are enormous, with many species, especially in around Colombia, Panama, and Venezuela. But going over data collection, we can see certain differences. When verifying species, there are different organizations with numerology regarding the hectares of mangroves that has been preserved or protected according to the Cartagena Convention. So here we can see many varieties, but what do we observe here when we go over this revision? That the deterioration of mangrove systems depend on the economic development of each country. For example, building of roads, land use change for shrimp exploitation, and tourism. In some countries, mining is the issue, like or hydrocarbon production, like Venezuela. So here we had decided to go over a revision through the Mangrove Global Watch, where we found that 204,000 hectares are have to be restored or are have been revised. There are documents that mention restoration projects in many of these areas. But one thing to highlight that of these reports and articles do not provide the full scope or vision the of whether a project is functioning or not. But we do observe an increase of the number of restoration projects all over the areas of South America, and the main actions of restoration are, as you can see on screen, reforestation and hydrologic rehabilitation. There's also topographic modification and replanting of mangroves. But the main actions are restoration and hydrologic rehabilitation. What areas are covered in these projects? The majority cover 11 to 100 hectares, and some that are minor below 1 hectare. What is the cost of restoration, which is important to take into account? It can be from $2,000 to $120,000 per hectare. However, it is more expensive to reforest than to carry out rehabilitation, ecological rehabilitation, because many projects focus on nurseries. It's important to highlight that there aren't studies of the analysis of cost benefit. Restoration is still expensive, independent of the activities that are required. What When we see this Great Caribbean section, we see there are projects very that are being carried out, but what we highlight is the lack of complementary information. What do we mean by this? That if the diagnosis has been carried out ecologically but also socially, what are their success indicators? How many hectares have been restored? Who were involved? Very few documents are found with uh, complete information. So this general overview shows that reforestation and rehabilitation are the main action. Do not mention communities involved, actors, the success or not success of these projects is important to mention. And how are these restoration projects carried out? Many have been done through compensation measures and are considering this as a single recipe, but it's not necessarily this way. Mangrove restoration is a strategy. That is why creating these guidelines with 7 steps or are taken into account. First, a work group has to be created in the community with a diversity of academics, experts, authorities, funders, who together select a site where objectives have to be established and the goals for access, what area is important for the community or not, water sources, etc. Once the site is selected and the objectives are established, there's a diagnosis or a forensic ecology process is carried out to identify the causes of why the mangrove has died, to understand the history and the socioeconomic context. Something important that we've learned by experience are the different techniques and materials that are present. The lack of resource or lack of materials to use for restoration are an issue. So here we can show the different instruments for measuring. This is the high tech that we mentioned in Mexico, the Mexican tech. So these are necessary for field work, for diagnosis. Based on this diagnosis on the field, we can have more accurate action plans for restoration and are specific for each site. So if there's a hydrologic restoration, then there is canals. Then if there's topography alteration, then we have to do this. Based on the topography, we do the restoration. So what we propose here is that restoration actions are a continuum. They're not inactive or passive, but based on actions per site. When we talk about these hydrological restoration, there are canals, new canals are built, and what to be done with the sediment that is extracted for modification. Reforestation and replanting of sites are also taken into account. But how do we know if the project is successful or not? This handbook provides social, economic, and social indicators, but it's also important to take into account that the response of the posterior response are based on variables responding to short, medium, and long-term results. Some think that trees are going to be found in a year or two, but this takes longer, like 15 years or more, and it depends on many physical chemical variables. We also have to highlight that we are presenting in social and economic indicators, a few of them, but there might be more. And that's why we invite you all to work on this. But these variables have to be simple, measurable, and replicable. Once we have this whole set of information, now we have to collect the information and disseminate the information through workshops and sharing the project, promote governance in communities as well, and generate products. Research requires documents to be generated, but also we have to provide simple documents for the communities that are understandable. This handbook is a reference document for those who want to implement restoration projects. These projects, for a greater success, they're not a recipe. They're a guideline of steps to be taken into account, and this helped create a work group and get communities involved. What suggestions do we have? We are working on a second version, not only on working for new projects, but also documenting them. There are many mistakes that are made, and we have to foster more strategies of analysis of cost benefit and actors that have to be involved, strengthen capacity of communities, and help them become more empowered of their work. So we call also to authorities at a regional local level to protect mangroves. There is more work to be done, and this will allow us to use resources more wisely and have more successful restoration projects. This is my presentation, and I thank you for any questions or comments.
Thank you, Claudia. And now I'm going to pass the floor to Dr. Jorge Herrera, the marine professor of Merida, biologist, Master of Science of the University of Barcelona, member of the Mexican Academy of Sciences, scientific coordinator of the Mexican Carbon Program, and the Celestun Coastal Observatory, specialist in coastal ecosystems, blue carbon, water quality, and socio-ecological resilience. Expert in mangrove and seagrass restoration and monitoring with a focus on climate change and artificial intelligence. Long-term monitoring coordinator at 15 sites on the Yucatan Peninsula. More than 250 scientific publications. More than 250 scientific publications and 67 theses supervised. Recognized by national and international institutions for his leadership in coastal wetlands. Welcome, Jorge, and please go ahead. Good morning, and thank you for the invitation. Thank you, Marfand, and to ask you if if you can see my presentation. Very well. In presentation mode, please. Okay. I would like to point out that this effort that I am going to present now has a group of researchers for the mangroves of the peninsula of Yucatan. There are two institutions at the moment, and more are adding to it. Many are working on different subjects regarding the mangroves. I'm going to talk about restoration in Mexico, but I believe that what I'm going to present is very common in other countries too. I'm going to talk about the problems that we are facing, what actions have been taken, what results we have achieved, and what lessons learned we have, and also what opportunities and challenges exist regarding mangrove restoration. So now, number one is even though Mexico is in the fourth place of mangroves, it is also in first place regarding threats to mangroves. There are many factors that degrade these ecosystems, and the government recognized that the degradation of mangroves is more serious even than deforestation of the forest, and recognizes that there's a degradation of the ecosystems. And last year there was a national program of restoration was published. That's very good because it means it's recognized that we need to find a solution. However, what about the goals? What goals are set? Now, if we think there's something that we have to correct, for example, that official data, Yucatan Peninsula says there are 3,000 hectares of degraded mangroves. However, their estimation is that there are really 85 hectares, and the difference is brutal. It's gigantic. And therefore, they're talking about for 2030, if we consider these 80,000 hectares, it's very hard to reach this. Another problem is that we don't know for sure where and what projects exist regarding mangrove restoration. Here I'm showing you three databases. The first are the sites where the group where Dr. Temple and myself are working are all the sites where we're working on restoration projects. In red, you can see the base that we have collected, the information, official information, where we can see FP, Ford, etc. And in yellow, we see the sites from the official sources. As you see, there are less of these, and that is the problem. There is a problem of showing all of the sites. And so basically, the problem is that there have been many restoration efforts, and we have given them names, different names. However, the problem is that there are still nurseries being set up with reforestation with Isophora. And now there's a fashion which is the canalitis and the tarchonitis, which is topographic modification without any basic information. And the other problem is that many of the projects have to do with environmental compensation. So there's hotels are built, and the developer pays a fine, and they give a compensation. These compensation are given to consultants that unfortunately do not have the training, and this creates problems. For example, in Cancun, for example, they made a canal for deforestation of mangrove. So first they deforested and then they made a canal to rehabilitate. It's contradictory. So there are organizations that do diagnosis in the office. They don't go to the field. They don't perform an analysis, and therefore, if you go directly to the plantation and it fails. So many times the project is a hydrological. What have we done? We have had to go firstly to generate knowledge, generate data, information through basic research, pilot projects, training people, and also engage the society. And these are the steps that we have followed. As a result of this is action, we have come up with a strategy with the academia, the government uh, entities, and the financial areas too. And this is another action has been to produce manuals of guidance for the implementers and also guidance or manuals for the communities. Important action has been to strengthen capacity. We have a technological package where we have workshops for communities, also including activities and workshops for children, workshops for governments, NGOs, and for universities and research centers. The packet has been proven and has been tested and in the UNESCO, and a few to 15 people. We had a final experiment with recently of 12 weeks where we could see that we do have the capacities to offer these workshops. So action number 4 is collaboration without ego. Why? Because many groups send their technicians to take a course and then they feel that they're experts in mangroves and restoration. And we see that's not so. There's still things are failing. So the most recent action, and actually it's the third year that we're doing this, is that we have included we have taken restoration to the civil society. We're doing by volunteer actions, and this is the third year's the 13th voluntary restoration actions in the mangroves. This includes a group of women called the Chilemeras that you might have heard about. With what results? Well, they have had some successful projects, and we can see the plantations, and also we can see the figure from satellite images of how the sites were before and how they look now. Are becoming empowered. And I'm very happy to say that one of these groups are the Chelemeras that we have actually been working with for 15 years. And recently, the state of Yucatan gave them a recognition to this group of women because of their defense and environmental restoration efforts. And they're also receiving international prizes. So, what is the tendency? Restoration should go towards improving the conditions of the communities. So, we see it as a solution based on nature for adaptation based on ecosystems. Some examples with the production of endemic bees hives, the meliponas, in areas of mangrove restoration. Another tendency is to accelerate the process of recovery and restore, and with less cost. The goal for Mexico for the carbon is very important. It says that, but how are we seeing this goal? We see the time, the emissions, and the process of restoration. If there is no restoration, the emissions will continue. And at the moment, we're going through a process of mitigation. And what are we doing in Yucatan? How much carbon is it? Well, if the 6,000 hectares of mangrove are seen, are taken as an example in the peninsula of Yucatan, Yucatan is contributing 33% of the national goal. And we see Celestun at the top. At the bottom, you can see the lab, and recently the area of Siancan, where we were a couple of weeks ago, we were there. What are the lessons learned? The first is that the forensic ecology increases the probabilities of success. It has to carry out a historical and social analysis of the problem and the context of the site. The long-term security has to be accompanied technically to minimize errors, the cost benefit, and also the synergy with and engagement with the actors, so that everybody knows and it's what is happening. Opportunities. There are many opportunities. Research for us, each site is a social and environmental experiment. And restoration is reduces vulnerability, increases resilience, and is an opportunity for business. There are many activities, for example, that can be done. The challenges would be to generate more velocity, come up with data, information faster, knowledge to increase recovery of the mangrove, synergy, etc. We have many collaborators, partners with whom we have interactions with the government, the private institutions, NHS, for example. And I leave you at this, and you can look at the social networks to find out more about it if you're interested. Thank you, Jorge. And for our final presentation, we have Dr. Miguel Cifuentes, a research associate at Smithsonian Institution, affiliate professor at Cartier. Miguel is an ecologist of global change with approximately 25 years of experience in research, technical assistance, and public policy. He has PhD in environmental science from Oregon State University, co-chair of the UN Decade of the Oceans Global Blue Carbon Program, lead author for the IPCC and author of more than 90 scientific publications, a leader in blue carbon development in Central America and the Caribbean since 2011, advisor to Latin American governments on climate action, nature-based solutions, and ecosystem-based adaptation, consultant for international organizations. Welcome, Miguel. Please go ahead. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. So we are here to what's happening. Thank you very much for the invitation of Marfond and the Marine team to be exposition. I was checking the list of we have people from all over Latin America. And it's wonderful to be here with all of you and with friends. What I would like to do today is in a way, to complement what the other two presenters have, is to show a little bit of what the mangroves have to do with the area of climate action and the next steps and the potential that it has for new strategies in the Mesoamerican area. Firstly, so that we can all be on the same page, what is the definition? Climate action is a combination of intervention of how we respond to climate crisis. Firstly, we have mitigation, which is trying to manage the reserves and the flows of carbon. And on the other hand, we have to accept that we cannot manage climate change anymore. We have to face it the best possible way. Under these two great large response, there are several mechanisms and options of implementation. I would like to look at the center where it says solutions based on nature and based on ecosystems, because this subject will be very important in the presentation. Talking about projects, there is not just one definition of what these projects are. I find that this can have many, many options. And we can talk about different options, dimensions to this. For example, we have sustainable management, protection management, and also the mangroves can be initiatives of research or coastal development, and also includes all of the some others such as others of livelihood, social, ecological, etc. So when we talk about the carbon, we consider of scaling and how many and which ecosystems the initiatives should be included. For example, if we include all the productive, um, uh, if we are excluding the functional areas from the reefs, etc. We also have to take into account the social cultural aspects, which are very important and the base for the success of this project. But I need to tell you that we must be careful not to fall in the trap that thinking that this is just a sale of carbon, or that is we're just talking about carbon. Unfortunately, this is a tendency that there are many projects of blue carbon related to the mangroves. And these projects, the ones that are most common, are the ones that are developed with a perceptive adaptation based on ecosystem to be able to reach resilience and social ecological growth. And this type of project, in order to achieve this resilience, we will have to work with the communities to strengthen their capacities. We're going to use integrating focuses not only on the coastal area, but also on the land area where we need to also talk about the financial mechanisms, which are very important, and green businesses, sustainable green businesses. But then in the project and the philosophy of intervention, so that these can be successful, all the countries that are developers of projects have to develop some very important conditions. Altogether, these conditions will impact conditions and the impact of the projects. There are many ways to describe these enabling conditions. And I'm going to talk about the ones that are more important. They also have to have very robust frameworks, technical capacities, and we also have the countries have to technical capacities monitoring, verification. With we also have to build financial elements in order to, after understanding and quantifying the value of our ecosystems, and this helps the country to have experience in implementation, understand this whole topic of the blue carbon. But we can't forget integration, integrity, and safe guarding. And this is a very important and a new concept. In the more operational area, the preparation for the intervention of the project, we need to know how to design and implement projects with this type of marine coastal communities, which is something that it's different, and we have to understand how to do it in the marine coastal areas. So, in the financial area, this has become more relevant recently, and we have to have the knowledge to understand, and we have to develop capacities to be able to design and implement financial instruments. It's not only important to have economists in our working with us, but we have to have people that are experts, financial experts and economists too. The country has to know how to organize all these elements in a type of the route flow chart. Uh-huh. So it's very important and very interesting. Incorporate some of these. So here we have the first enabling conditions. We have the components of projects of restoration, mainly conservation, and we are learning to know how to learn how to quantify and monitorize the results and the projects inside the country and to report internationally to the Convention of Climate Change.
So this is a complex one that for Costa Rica has been one to put forward. Speaking of finance, there are many complexities and many have their barriers. But to understand these barriers, it's important, it will help us overcome them. One of them is volunteer markets or the sale of carbon bonds. And there's also involuntary market. The Article 6, these mechanisms, financial mechanisms, are mentioned in this convention. Let's not neglect these schemes of compensation, for example, and ecosystemic and multilateral options, fiduciary funds, etc. It is very common that we might need a combination of these options to be able to implement our projects. As was mentioned by the doctor before me, the cost of restoration can be significantly high, hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on the complexity of the forensic ecology that has been taken into account to restore these ecological processes. To conclude, I want to share with you how we are doing in the region regarding these enabling conditions of blue carbon. Overall, we're doing very well because all the countries of the region have the NDCs, the National Determined Contributions or promises on the lines of restoration and adaptation. And some countries have established the ecosystemics restoration of mangroves and marine prairies. Countries have been able to are talking about this and have developed protection schemes for mangrove protection. The majority are property of the state, and are cannot be purchased by anyone. In in Belize, the private property of mangroves is allowed in some cases, but these prep these network preparation and its technical assistance have provided national forestry inventories and mechanisms that are part of the red, and science and research is very strong thanks to this dynamics of blue carbon. We also have lots of information and experience with mangrove projects, especially when talking about restoration and sustainable management. I want to highlight what is developed in Mexico and Yucatan and El Salvador as well, with decades of implementation of this type of restoration with many lessons learned. Obviously, not everything is perfect. There's room for improvement, and I want to highlight that there could be an improvement in policies and strategies, specific strategies for blue carbon. Only Costa Rica has a focused national blue carbon strategy that is focused and implemented, and is the in implementing officially the blue carbon accountability, or or keeping a balance of greenhouse gases at a national level, and it is all a discipline that has to be dominated. And we have all received technical assistance, international assistance, so we can say we have financial mobilization capacity. What we need or we're lacking is that to ensure that these are all linked to investment mech systems, mobilization systems. And this is something that we need to strengthen or that we lack to be able to strengthen these carbon initiatives and attract these processes, these investment processes that are of high quality and integrity, socially and ecologically. Here is my information, contact information on screen. You can contact me, and it's a pleasure to be able to share with you this presentation. Thank you, Miguel, and the rest of our presenters, and thank you for sharing your knowledge with us. Now we have some time for questions, and if you want to ask any questions, write them down on the chat box, and me and Beatrice will be selecting some of the questions. Thank you so much, Steve, and our presenters today. And we have received, or we have actually shared on the chat, the handbook. And also you can find it on the Marfund webpage, www.marfund.org. First question that we have is from the social networks. What has been the reaction of the communities regarding education efforts, and how have they changed their practices when understanding the importance of mangroves? So if Dr. Claudia or Dr. Herrera would like to share their experience with communities. Regarding this, the result has been very positive. When we present a project to them and they are involved and we give them the correct workshops, they respond positively. One thing we insist on is that we do not teach them. What we do is we help them consolidate their knowledge that they already have, and what they need is tools. We have to provide tools to them. So to create information, as Dr. Herrera mentioned with the handbook for communities, it's very important. Technical experts or people that go to communities provide promising things that are not so real or tangible our issue. So what we have to do is involve them, and this has functioned. This has worked in working with the communities. The Chalemeras are a very positive example. They're part of the community, but they're biologists, ecologists, engineers, and they have understood the ecosystems very well, and they actually provide a very important role in restoration. So they have to learn the tools. We also have to learn with communities to teach them all the possibilities, all the opportunities, and also the responsibility of conservation, restoration, and management of natural resources. Thank you, Dr. Claudia. Another question that is asked is, what is your opinion regarding the Mangrove Breakthrough Initiative by Semarnat regarding restoration of mangroves in Mexico? Miguel has been working on several countries, so I'd like to ask Miguel to talk about this because he has had a more broad context with several countries. And if there's an opportunity, I would like to share what we have done specifically in Yucatan with landscapes. Thank you, Jorge, because this is a question that is very important for Mexico. The mangrove breakthrough, it is a global initiative, not Mexican initiative, but a global initiative with the main objective of joining together or agglomerating the greatest number of financing for climate action using blue carbon ecosystems, especially mangroves. So this node of the mangrove breakthrough, this challenge has it provides a commitment for certain actions linked with commit with NDCs and a certain number of hectares can be linked to a year to enable development processes, etc. What I want to highlight is that Mexico confirmed a few years ago their their willingness to be part of this global challenge, global breakthrough. So basically, it is the support of restoration initiatives, management initiatives with mangroves. This is very important because things are not do not happen automatically. The enabling conditions that a country has to uh, enable or create this breakthrough, mangrove breakthrough creates the dynamics to contribute to the commitment of these enabling conditions leading to field work. So it's a top-down initiative, but and also links together initiatives from bottom to top to be able to achieve the mangrove breakthrough goals. I want to basically compliment on what has been done in Mexico. This initiative for a proposal with other organizations has been developed, and personally, I think it's a very good initiative. This proposal of this alignment of working together in an integrated and participative manner is very good. However, in Mexico, the organizations that are leading this do not have an experience in mangroves per se. They're very good in management of resources, but when we focus on project implementation, things become a challenge. For example, the challenge of where to restore. How many hectares are we going to propose? What is going to be the national proposal? This is an issue because of the lack of maps, focused map, targeted maps of mangroves. And this database, unified database, is a challenge that where we can say that this is the information we have. I, out of modesty, I feel that Yucatan is the best prepared in this result. The landscape where the effort should begin is the peninsula of Yucatan, where is information available, communities are prepared, project execution is ready, and there is a possibility to do this, and then include other regions that do not have the capacity, but start strengthening them and training them uh, in the process. I think this strategy would be much more positive, but there's a lot of ego in the process, and many community regions want this initiative first. But when we ask them, what is the baseline of your projects? What are your conditions? This is this information is not available. So I think the initiative has to be fostered, promoted, but the strategy has to be focused, beginning with small steps, and then including more groups and more organizations. Thank you for your responses, Dr. Miguel and Dr. Herrera. One final question. I would like to ask, what is the compensation mechanism that has been most successful? Who would like to respond to this question? Dr. Miguel, maybe? I could not hear the question. Could you repeat the question? What is the compensation mechanism that has provided the best result? I think the question is talking about what are the tools or restoration tool mechanisms for mangrove restoration. And I think Dr. Claudia would be the best one to respond to this question. My experience is more with hydrologic rehabilitation. So I think this is what you mean. So what has functioned for restoration with successful results, and we have seen them in the Yucatan Peninsula, is to do this plantation strategy with a proper diagnosis. I mentioned this before that restoration is not a recipe. Many ask, how many mangrove plant trees should I plant per hectare? But there's no formula. Something that Dr. Herrera mentioned is that this strategy is based on the knowledge of 20 years of effort for establishing a work group, defining the restoration area with a forensic ecology that is sound, and identify the mangroves that are more degraded or have died. And then, based on this diagnosis, carry out actions. There are criteria and for how to establish, how to build canals. It is not a kilometers effort, but it's learning how to water flows. There are issues when we don't learn about because there are also challenges that we have to show these lessons learned. The canalitis. There are pioneer species that have the best conditions for establishing the sites as well before mangrove restoration or restoration actions. We can show you on a Google Maps the mangroves of Sedlistun, where this has been very successful with team efforts and financing. But this is the process. This is the strategy, is identifying the deterioration causes because each action is goes according to the site. It is tailor-made strategies. So canals recommended doesn't mean you have to build canals. Canalization has been established in other countries, and I have seen that excess of water can also cause mangrove degradation. Thank you so much, Doctor. We are finishing our webinar, and we thank you all for the questions that you have sent us through the chat, and we will figure a way of responding to them. This webinar will be recorded, and it is going to be uploaded on the Marfund website soon. And here on our website, you can also access the mangrove handbook that Dr. Claudia mentioned. But if you can share a link of the community handbook which is the more simplified version, if you can share that on the chat, that would be great. There is also a survey on the chat that we would like all of you to fill out. It's a Google form, and if you can fill it out throughout the day, that would be very helpful to strengthen our webinars. And before we finish, one last question is there a mechanism or framework to strengthen restoration areas? I think this is focused on ecological forensics of the site. This is the main step that has been discussed. Any previous analysis will help you identify the mechanisms that you can prioritize. So, any final comments? Yes, that is a very good question. Where am I going to restore it? Something we have mentioned is that the importance of having very good maps to understand how many hectares at a national or regional level do we have of mangroves or degraded areas. Sometimes this is considered just as land use or vegetable or green coverage. If there is no coverage, then they just say this is the area. But we have to modify the criteria or identify what are the degraded sites, what are the criteria of closeness, etc. It's important also to establish a social criteria, and if even if there's highly degraded area, if it is socially degraded, we won't be able to work there as well. So these are some of the aspects. Once you select the site, this is part of the strategy that we have mentioned, and that Anevatri is highlighted as well. But if there's any additional comments, there are many criteria of prioritization. There's multi-criteria, not only ecologically, socially, context, the space, closeness, accessibility criteria, availability of water sources, etc., etc. These are all part of a multi-criteria analysis that needs to be carried out to prioritize. We can have thousands of hectares, but where do we start? Where can there be a successful experience that can be shown to funders as well? So that is our proposal, a multi-criteria analysis, multi-space, and space and explicit to help you prioritize the restoration. Thank you. Thank you to everyone that has presented this morning. We have learned greatly from each and every one of you. And thank you all for joining us today. Remember, we will also have a second webinar regarding seagrass and it is all part of the promotion of management, protection, and restoration of these critical ecosystems. We wish you all have a wonderful day, and we will be connected soon with another webinar. Thank you all.